next speaker is Yvan Castin from LKB. So, please.
Thank you. So the system that I'm going to discuss is a gas of spin-1/2 fermions, and so spin up and spin down, and this is 3D, and I have actually interactions between the opposite spin particles by a contact interaction. So zero range with some scattering length A. So we know that this type of interaction, this was already mentioned in a previous talk, is attractive. Here I have in mind mainly the regime of strong interactions where KFA is larger than 1, where KF is a Fermi wave number. Okay. So in this talk, I will skip this part. I will concentrate on the excitation modes of this system. So I will remind you briefly of the building blocks because they were already mentioned in the previous talk. So here I'm mainly in the case where there is the same number of spin up and spin down particles, which means that at low enough temperature, the fermions will form bound pairs, right? The Cooper pairs, and you will get actually a condensate of bound pairs. I will assume that the energy, the temperature is much below the binding energy to delta of such a pair, so that there is a very small fraction of broken pairs. Mainly in the talk, I will assume that the chemical potential is positive, so I am mainly in a regime where those pairs have a strong composite nature. They are not bosons, but they are very composite bosons. Okay, so what I have to remind you is first the excitation spectrum of an unpaired fermion in the gas. So according to BCS theory, it has this shape. So epsilon k as a function of the wave number k has a minimum around a non-zero k0. And the minimum is equal to delta, that is the pairing gap. So this type of excitation, I will call it little gamma in the talk. This is a fermionic quasi-particle, and it has a massive character because it's parabolic around the minimum, right? Once you have this excitation spectrum, you realize that you can immediately get a broken pair continuum simply by breaking the bound pairs. For example, using a Bragg excitation as in the previous talk. That is, you can break the pair into a fermionic quasi-particle of momentum q over 2 plus k, and another spin down, this time fermionic quasi-particle of momentum q over 2 minus k, q being the wave vector of the Bragg excitation. And the corresponding energy, epsilon of q over 2 plus k plus epsilon of q over 2 minus k, where k spans r cube, then describes the broken pair continuum. Of course, there is another type of excitation in this system because you can excite the center of mass of the pairs, and this gives rise to a so-called acoustic branch with quanta, which are the famous phonons. So here I've plotted the corresponding dispersion relations. So this is h bar omega q. Q will refer to the phonons as a function of the phonon wave number q. And you see this acoustic branch, which has a linear start. Actually, I also reproduce it on the board. Maybe I can switch on the light. And of course, this acoustic branch will meet the lower border of the broken pair continuum at some point and ceases to exist, at least according to time-dependent BCS theory, linearized around the steady state. So this is an approximate theory. And here, this hatched region here is the famous broken pair continuum, starting here at 2 delta. So in my talk, what will play a role actually is the so-called curvature parameter. That is, it's not enough to keep the linear part of the spectrum, but I have to include also a curvature of this acoustic branch. So a Q cube term, parameterized by this number little gamma, which is dimensionless, and which can be actually negative on the BCS side, where delta is small and where the upper border of the broken pair continuum pushes down the acoustic branch so that it tends to bend downwards. On the opposite limit, in the so-called BEC limit, where the bound pairs become bosons, elementary bosons, then this little gamma is positive. So we can have both regimes in this system. To be complete, I should mention actually that inside the broken pair continuum, there exists a collective branch, which is so-called X branch or amplitude mode branch. There are several names. So probably I will not have time to discuss about it, but we actually have also studied in great detail this branch, which was not really observed, to my knowledge, in any system. That is, we know that the dispersion relation has a quadratic start with a complex coefficient. But as far as I know, this was not observed in any system. There are systems where they have seen the Q equals 0 limit, where they see so-called Higgs oscillations, but they have not, to my knowledge, measured what is the dispersion relation of this branch. Okay, so in the first part of the talk, I will, yes, so, okay, transition sentence. What is interesting in this system is that, contrary to bosons, you have two types of excitation branch, you see. So this epsilon k branch for the fermionic quasi-particles and the phononic branch for the phonons. And what is interesting is that all those excitations, they can interact. You have interaction between phonons, and you have also interactions between phonons and fermionic quasi-particles. So this made the system actually very rich. So as a first example, I will treat the case of interaction between phonons. The phonons do interact, and this leads to sound attenuation in this system that you can measure experimentally just by measuring the damping of phonon mode. So the question is how to describe in such an interaction between phonons, knowing that it's difficult to have a reliable macroscopic theory in the strongly interacting regime. And the answer to that, at least in the long wavelength limit, is so-called quantum hydrodynamic theory.
Okay, and you can hear us as well?
Yes, I can hear you.
Same here. I might be sidetracked briefly because I'm actually at a conference virtually.
Oh, can somebody mute Henning?
Can you mute?
Okay, maybe I should go on now. So in this quantum hydrodynamic theory of Landau and Kaletnikov, you introduce two fields. The first field is the density field rho hat of R of the system, of the gas, of the fluid. And you have a second field, which is the phase field phi of R of the superfluid. And you assume that the velocity field is irrotational, that is, V is equal to h bar over m times the gradient of this phase field. Okay, so here I've written the corresponding Hamiltonian. Basically, what you do, you cut the fluid into little pieces. Of course, each piece is small as compared to the thermal Debreu wavelengths of the phonons, but it will be much larger than the correlation length of the superfluid. And then you pretend that the energy of the system, so the Hamiltonian actually, is the sum of the energies of all these little elements. So there is a factor drq, which is the volume of such an element. Here there is a kinetic energy of the element. The element is moving with a local velocity v, so it has a kinetic energy 1/2 mv squared, and I forgot here to multiply by rho, the density, to get the mass of the little element. And there is a second contribution, which is the internal energy of the small element, which is given simply by E0 of rho hat multiplied by dr cube. Here, E0 of rho is simply the volumic density of the homogeneous system at 0 temperature. So if you want, E0 is simply related to the equation of state of the gas. The chemical potential at 0 temperature is simply the derivative of E0 with respect to density rho. So basically, in this theory, the only input is the equation of state at 0 temperature. And then you will be able to get exact predictions to leading order in temperature at non-zero temperature. So to recover the phonons and their interactions, what you say is that at low temperature, you have weak fluctuations of the density around the mean density. And you have also weak fluctuation of the phase around its zero momentum Fourier component. So introducing the deviation delta rho hat and delta phi hat of rho hat and phi hat from the zero momentum Fourier component, you quadratize, actually, you expand the Hamiltonian in powers of these deviations. To zeroth order, H reduces to the ground state energy of the fluid. There is no first order contribution. To second order, you get a quadratic Hamiltonian, which is just the Hamiltonian of non-interacting phonons. So something like some over Q of H bar CQ, BQ dagger BQ, where BQ annihilates a phonon. And here you get actually a purely linear spectrum, which is a limitation of this theory. And what Landau and Kaletnikov understood already is that when you will calculate, for example, the damping rate of the phonons, this is not sufficient. So what they did is that they replaced by hand this H bar CQ by the cubic dispersion relation I was showing on the previous graph. And actually, they were right in doing so. That is, you can give a justification to this procedure. When you go to next order, that is to third order in the small deviations, you get H3, which contain terms like B dagger, B dagger, B dagger, B, 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 and so on. And you get so cubic interactions between the phonons with diagrams like that. Here, this is a Belyaev process where the phonon Q can decay into two phonons. Here, this is a Landau process where the phonon Q can scatter on a pre-existing phonon and merge with it. And you also processes that create from scratch three phonons or destroy three phonons. You also H4 corresponding to a 4 phonon interaction and so on. So once you have done that, then you can calculate simply using the Fermi-Godon rule, the damping rate of the phonons. So the case little gamma positive, that is when the acoustic branch is convex. This is a well-known case, and the damping is due to 3 phonon processes. So here I will concentrate on the less studied case where the branch is actually concave, little gamma is negative. And then in this case, the 3 phonon processes are no longer resonant. They cannot conserve energy and momentum. And now the damping of the phonons is due to 4 phonon processes. So you have a process like that where Q, the mode you have populated, for example, experimentally by Bragg excitation or whatever other technique, will scatter on a pre-existing thermal phonon Q prime, and it will give Q double prime and Q triple prime. And now what you have to do is to calculate the coupling amplitude, the amplitude of this process. Then you put it in the Fermi-Godon rule, integrate over Q prime, Q double prime, and you get the damping rate. So yeah, I can skip the details. This amplitude A is not simply given by H4, which contains direct 4 phonon processes, but you also to include H3 to second order, which contains by a sequence of cubic processes described actually 4 phonon scattering. And here you see the result. It's a bit faint, but so the result we find is that gamma Q at low Q and at low temperature. So to be mathematically rigorous, what you have to do, you have to fix the ratio Q over temperature first. We call this Q bar. And then you take the limit temperature going to 0. This is a rigorous way of taking the limit. Then what we find that there is a prefactor involving only the equation of state of the system. Here, for example, you get the derivative of the sound velocity with respect to density. there is a temperature dependence, which is to the power 7. Here in the denominator, you get the curvature parameter, little gamma, which shows you that actually, if you would take little gamma equals 0, so taking a pure linear spectrum, you will get a divergent result in this theory, which should be incorrect. And at the end, you have this universal and reduced function, gamma bar of Q bar, which depends on nothing. It's the same function for all systems, all superfluids, fermionic as in my talk, but it would work also for liquid helium-4, which is bosonic. Here you have actually a very simple expression of gamma bar of Q bar. We are very proud of it because at the starting point, actually, there was a sextuple integral, right? So we were able to do 4 integration analytically to, at the end, get only a double integral of a quite simple integrand. Okay, so what is interesting actually is that our result is in disagreement with Landau and Kaletnikov. We have studied in the 40s exactly the same problem. We disagree with them, not on numerical prefactors, but really on the power laws of the dependence of gamma bar of Q bar at low Q bar or at large Q bar. For example, at low Q, we find that this gamma bar varies cubically. It has Q bar cube. On the contrary, Landau and Kaletnikov are predicting a linear behavior as Q bar. And also in the large Q bar limit, we find a Q bar squared divergence of this damping rate, where they are finding a much faster divergence, Q bar to the 4. So there is a disagreement. And to my knowledge, actually, there is no experiment in any system being able actually to decide which theory is correct. I will give a second illustration of our studies of interaction between the building block excitations. This is the interaction between the phonons and the fermionic quasi-particle, phi gamma. So I will assume that now in my system, I have a single fermionic quasi-particle, simply because I've put one more spin-up fermion than the spin-down fermions. So in my system, I have this single fermionic quasi-particle. It cannot disappear because it's a fermionic quasi-particle, so there is a selection rule, okay? But what it can do, it can actually scatter on the thermal phonons. And then this fermionic quasi-particle will perform an erratic motion in the superfluid. And I would like to characterize actually this erratic motion, right? Experimentally, you could actually measure such a motion and then extract information on the interaction between phi and gamma. So how to get an Hamiltonian describing such an interaction? Again, we use what Landau and Kaletnikov did, basically in the same paper. This is a local homogeneity approximation, if you want. That is in the low temperature limit, the thermal Debye wavelength of the phonons, it diverges as the inverse of the temperature because the dispersion relation is linear. On the contrary, the coherence length, the thermal de Broglie coherence length of the fermionic quasi-particle, it diverges only as one of the square root of temperature because the particle is massive. Okay, so you see the fact that you have a relativistic particle coupled to a massive particle leads to a separation of scales in the low temperature limit. So here I made a little plot. You see this little wave packet. This is the wave packet of the fermionic quasi-particle. It's very narrow as compared to the typical waves of the thermal phonons. So this means that basically the gamma quasi-particle will see locally an homogeneous superfluid having a density rho of R and a velocity v of R. So to get the energy, what I have to do simply is to take the dispersion relation epsilon k, okay, of rho of the fermionic quasi-particle in the homogeneous system. I have to replace rho by the local density of the superfluid, rho hat of R. Rho hat of R. and I have to replace k by p over h bar, where p is the momentum operator of the quasi-particle. Okay. But this is not exactly the end of the story, because I have to keep in mind that the superfluid is moving at some velocity v, and that there is a Doppler effect. I have to add. So I have to add plus p dot v, where v so is the local velocity of the superfluid, and p again is the momentum operator of the quasi-particle. So once I have done that, I can move to second quantization. Again, I can do an expansion in powers of delta rho and delta phi. To zeroth order, I get an Hamiltonian sub of epsilon k gamma k dagger gamma k of 3 fermionic quasi-particles. Then to first order in delta rho, I get terms like gamma dagger gamma b dagger and gamma dagger gamma b, corresponding to the emission of a phonon by a gamma quasi-particle, or to the absorption of a phonon by a gamma quasi-particle. To second order, I find a direct scattering process where the gamma quasi-particle can absorb and emit a phonon. Okay. Also, I have to suppose that the gamma quasi-particle is stable with respect to the emission of phonons. Okay, so I have to assume that the velocity of the gamma quasi-particle is such that it cannot emit phonons in arbitrary number and momenta without violating conservation of energy and momentum. Otherwise, it's not fun. You see, my gamma quasi-particle is not stable. Yeah. Here I have calculated the stability domain using BCS theory and time-dependent BCS theory as function of k, which is the momentum of the wave vector of the fermionic quasi-particle, and delta over mu, which measures the interaction strength. And basically, I have a right border, which is limited by a sonic instability, 5 minutes, where Vk is equal to C. I have another border here, which is correspond to Vk equal minus C. So this is what you would expect from the Landau criterion. But what is interesting is that BCS theory predicts that there is actually a border here, which is called CS, where the instability is due to subsonic. So this is a subsonic instability. So on CS, the velocity of gamma is below C strictly, and the instability corresponds to the emission of non-infinitesimal wave number phonons. So you see, the destabilization comes to the emission of phonons with a non-infinitesimal wave numbers. I don't know, actually, this was calculated before, and if there is experimental reality in that, I think it would be interesting to investigate, because it's nice to have a subsonic instability for such a fermionic quasi-particle. This doesn't happen so often. Okay. I have to mention here briefly that we have a disagreement with a paper by Lerch, Bartosz, and Kopiec, where they claim that the fermionic quasi-particles do not exist in 3D in a fermionic superfluid of neutral particles, because they predict that there is some infrared logarithmically divergent suppression of the spectral weight of this quasi-particle. So here I don't have time, but using the fact that the coupling between gamma and the phonons scales as square root of q, that is, it's proportional to the amplitude delta rho q of fluctuation of density of the phonons in the mode of wave vector q, we actually refute this statement by Kopiec, Lerch, and Bartosz. So we do claim that the quasi-particles exist in 3D. Okay, so at the end, what you have to do again is to calculate the scattering amplitude of this quasi-particle on a phonon. So qk gives q prime, k prime. You have plotted the little diagrams. There is a trap. You should not forget that the bosons, the phonons are interacting. So you have a diagram like that where the phonon splits into two. And then if you want, the phonon is dressed by virtual phonons, and the quasi-particle scatters onto one of those virtual phonons. So you should not forget this diagram. neither this one or the phonon actually scatters on the phonon halo of a gamma quasi-particle. So at the end, we get a result of this scattering amplitude. And once you have this result, you can calculate the force, the mean force experienced by the gamma quasi-particle. We find that to linear order, it scales as temperature to the power 8, with a prefactor which depends, actually it's a post factor on my slide, which depends on momentum. So we assume that actually our calculation is exact. You see, we are given an exact expression of this post factor for the force. And again, for the momentum diffusion of this gamma quasi-particle, we have a transverse and longitudinal momentum diffusion. It scales as temperature to the 9 with the post factors that we claim to have calculated exactly. Something funny and maybe paradoxal is that if you take k equal k0, you see exactly here, then the group velocity of the gamma quasi-particle is 0, but still the mean force experienced by this particle is non-zero. So even if the velocity is 0, the mean force is non-zero. Simply it scales as temperature to the 9, that is, it's subleading as compared to the generic force. So maybe you find this puzzling because you would say the velocity is 0. There seems to be some parity invariance. Why is it that the mean force is non-zero? Well, and from that, we can also calculate the spatial diffusion coefficient. As a last remark, I would say that it's nice, of course, to try to compare this calculation of the scattering amplitude of phonon gamma on other results. The other predictions I know in the literature are for zero velocity of the gamma quasi-particle, so for k equal k0. We disagree with all of them. There is one by Landau and Kaletnikov. Second one I know is Nicolis and Penko, 2018. Landau, Kaletnikov, and Nicolis Penko, they disagree among themselves. We disagree with Landau, Kaletnikov, and Nicolis and Penko. So it's funny, no? And again, as far as I know, there is no experiment being able de trancher, en fait, vous voyez, de trancher entre ces deux prédictions. So, to summarize, I have presented results I think are fundamental, in disagreement with everybody, and confirmed by no theory. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there any question in the room?
Don't throw me tomatoes.
Or online, remotely? It does not seem so.
Maybe I can ask a question.
Yeah.
So Ivan ended in a very interesting note, right? That there's all this disagreement, and in terms of moving forward, how would you like? Are there some of these results that you think are quite clearly wrong and therefore disagree with yours, or?
I think the result of Landau Kaletnikov of 1949 is wrong because they didn't properly take into account the fact that R and P, the position operator and the momentum operator of the gamma quasi-particle, do not commute. This is already the beginning of quantum mechanics. You see, it's amazing that they are doing that. This paper is simply amazing. But here they did a little étourderie, I think. For Nicolis and Penko, this is more interesting. We are exchanging mails. They say they are trying to compare and understand. Then the COVID came. They are telling now they will resume. I don't know. The problem is that they are in the United States and I'm in Europe, so we cannot meet. Just in front of a blackboard to finish. Personally, of course, I believe in our calculations. There are double check, triple check.
Yes. Okay.
Compared to microscopic models, also we made several checks, so they seem to be robust.
Ivan, if I may ask also, I had the same question, but I was going to focus mostly on the Landau-Kaletnikov. So effectively, you have different physical processes. So if you were to write the Feynman phase diagram, that non-commutativity would lead to different physical processes. Am I correct? So this means Landau and Kladnikov forgot to include some terms.
Yeah, so this is in the gamma phonon scattering. Huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
And so what are the physically different processes that you have? If you just, it's hard to see, very nice handwritten notes, but it's hard to see what the processes, the Feynman diagrams are when you compare that with Landau-Kladnikov, because you have this dependence, right, which is T cubed, and they have linear dependence. So where the T cube is coming from?
Oh, sorry. So you are talking about the phonon scattering, right?
Yeah.
Then in case there is no commutation issue, this is another problem. So what they did is that they wrote all the diagrams, okay, and I think all of them, this is correct. But then for some reason, they pretended that one of the diagrams is leading, either at low Q or at large Q. And
Okay,
they neglected the other diagrams. And we disagree with that. We disagree.
Okay, was a computational error then, right? The physical processes,
exactly.
they identified the correct physical processes, and they made a computational error.
Yes, they claim that some diagram was leading, but when you compare all the diagrams, they are all of the same order. And when you sum up all of them, they cancel to leading order. This is why we have a different exponent, you see. Okay. And since the amplitude appears in a square, you see, if you lose one order in the amplitude, you lose two orders in the rate. And this is why there are two orders of difference. There's a difference of two orders between our result and the Landau-Kladnikov result.
Okay.
So is it correct?
So I suspect that their result is wrong.
Yeah, so is it correct that if you keep all diagrams and you go up to the end of the calculation, an analytical calculation, you get the right result, while they didn't make that?
Exactly.
Okay.
We haven't checked numerically that integrating, we need a numerical check.
Okay, so the diagrams were right, that the calculation was wrong. Okay, sounds good. Thank you.